Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be tuning into the Esports Awards Origins podcast. My name is Trevor Henry. You may know me as Quickshot, and this is the podcast where we talk to your favorite content creators, the best and past and future esports talent, people behind the scenes, as well as business and influencers. Now, today, it is my absolute pleasure to speak to somebody that you may not know as Peter Rasmussen. You may not know that he won the Intel Extreme Masters Grand Slam. You may not know he won 5 CS majors. You may not know he was a 7-time top 20 HLTV player of the year, Counter-Strike player, and arguably one of the best entry fraggers to ever grace Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to speak to dupreeh. Good afternoon, dupreeh. I know you're fresh back from vacation. We're diving straight into a pretty big intro. How do you feel when you hear all of your accolades?
It's funny when you read it aloud. I was thinking that's actually, when you go back and then I listen to what I have achieved throughout my career. It seems like it's been such a long time, but then it kind of baffles me a little bit that I've tried to achieve so many things, and it just feels like I actually didn't get to do it. It just kind of reminds me of a feeling that's not true in some sense. It's great to hear that I've achieved all the things, because sometimes you just kind of forget about the whole thing.
I mean, listen, it sounds like a fairy tale. Like when you
actually
write it all down, it's like so massive. I will say this, the Origins podcast, in case you don't know, and for any potential new viewers, it's one where we want to dive a little bit behind the scenes. So for everybody that's tuning in to this conversation with dupreeh, I'm not going to spend a significant amount of time talking about that legendary roster, at least the amazing run, mostly because I want to know how we got there. I want to know what Peter was like as a student. What's your first memories of gaming? So let's start there. What's your first and earliest memories of playing any games?
I think it's one of those very classic stories with having an older brother that is very much into gaming, and when he got his first gaming PC, that's what kind of sparked things for me, because I have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me, and at that point, as with any older sibling, you're looking up to them and you're looking to, do what they do. And, when I saw that he was playing video games with his friends, that's what I wanted to do as well. I wanted to, find a place where, I was having a lot of fun outside of maybe school or the playground. And that's probably the first memory that I have, that I got to play with my brother when he got his first gaming PC and when he was playing with his friends. And I was this young kid that, that was brought into their kind of world, and actually had a really good time, and actually proved to be better than them. So that was probably the first memory.
That's lovely. Okay. So I want to do a timeline here now. Roughly how old were you? And I know that especially in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the Nordics and Counter-Strike, it was one-on-one. So did you immediately start with online games, or with the single player? And how old were you before you actually started, let's say, kicking your brother's ass?
Well, I think he got his first PC. We usually played on my dad's work PC at the beginning, but that was just offline games. I think we tried to play Heroes of Might and Magic together, these turn-based things that we could play alongside with each other. I had a hard time understanding the whole game, so he would always kick my ass. And for a long time, we also played split screen Medal of Honor on PlayStation, and he always kicked my ass. And you had this agreement that we were not allowed to look at each other's screen, because obviously it was a split screen at that point, right? And I never understood why he would always beat me. He always knew where I was. I always stuck to the rules, right? So he ended up kicking my ass. So it was good to, when I actually got my own screen and we could play online, that we could that I could trying to kick his ass back. But I think he got his first PC when he was 15. So around I was 10, or I would say.
10.
Yeah, so wow. 10 years, that's when the online gaming kind of started, and when we could play against each other. But before that, I put a lot of effort into playing a lot of single player games as well.
I really love hearing the Medal of Honor. It's something that's part of my childhood as well, especially that in Call of Duty. It's just the things that you do when you're younger.
Exactly.
What were you like in school? And I know that, relatively speaking, with the amount that you've accomplished, you are on the younger side, right? I get to speak to a bunch of people who have won tournaments, and who are closer to my age. I'm turning 40 very soon, so there's a bit of a gap. But what was school like? And did you ever have to have any conversations with family, parents, about what gaming was and what school was and what the future was going to look like?
Yeah, 100%. It was actually quite a big topic for me and my family back at the time, when I started feeling that I I discovered that you could actually play Counter-Strike, which was obviously my main game. When I discovered that you could play it on a competitive level, that's where things, I would say, in sort of way, got a little bit more difficult, because my parents was obviously from a timeline where, you couldn't really live off playing video games, and you couldn't like make a career of it. So they were just worried about one thing. They were worried about my grades and how I was doing in school, but also like the social aspect of it. They kind of realized that putting myself in more like a place where I wouldn't socialize with people, but I really tried to explain with them that I would actually socialize with people. I was talking with them online, I was playing, but for them it was kind of hard to understand. So that was quite a big topic. But the main thing for me as a kid when I was growing up in school was that I was trying to find a place where I could thrive, a place where I work better than someone else, because I've never really been a genius with the balls, So I was not the guy that was picked first when you had to pick teams on the playground, right? So I was trying to find a place where I was better than my classmates and my friends and everything. Because as a kid, I think you just try and find places where you excel and where you can have fun and you don't think too much about the outside world. And that's the one thing I really found in gaming, because every time we would go somewhere and play, everyone wanted to be on my team, right? Everyone wanted to be my teammate because I was the better one. So that was like a feeling of feeling, feeling good at something. And I think that was very important for me at that time, obviously.
Now let's talk a little bit about the exploration of the competitive space, right? Because you, as I mentioned, you start playing online around 10 years old. Counter-Strike Source is probably the game that you're playing or sort of introduced you online. At the time, the 1.6 scene is still massive, and like, whenever I think back to the early 2000s, some of the big names that I think of, I have to be honest, are predominantly Swedish. Now, this is a South African's perspective, okay? So I remember Heaton, I remember Spawn, I remember the NIP days, right? But Danish and Swedish Counter-Strike, especially in the 2000s, was massive. Who were some of the teams of players do you remember kind of looking at and being like, man, I could do that. I could try that.
I have a very funny memory because Sonic, which was my coach back in the days in Astralis and also Vitality, but also like throughout my entire career pretty much. He was playing an MTW at that time, a 1.6 team that I guess everyone in Denmark was looking up to when you were talking about Counter-Strike. And for me, it was funny to watch him play in those times. I remember a given situation where I was staying up late. They were playing a tournament in China, so the timelines or the time zones were very different. And my parents had already told me to go to bed, but I snuck out of bed and got back to my PC to watch them play. And then I remember that they won a very important round, and I remember that I screamed, and then I realized that I screamed so loud that I woke up my parents, and my mom came running down to my room, and she was pissed at me and furious that I had snuck out of bed, and I was grounded for like a week or something. She pulled like my internet connection for a week. And then it's funny that he didn't transition into being my coach in my future career. But yeah, MTW by far the one. Yeah, it's really funny. And also one of my greatest friends today. But yeah, MTW was probably the team when I'm looking at Counter-Strike that I was looking up to, also because it was when I watched them, I kind of feel like that's what I wanted to do. Like I want to be playing. I'm really good at playing Counter-Strike. I'm really good at playing video games. I want to make a living out of it. At that time, it really seemed unreal, but that was what kind of sparked my interest in professional or like esports in general.
I mean, that's an incredible story, and it's insane. I remember the saying, work until your idols become your rivals and then beat them. And that's one of the things that like really drives, like, but to be able to be coached to the other team. Okay, so you've got inspired. You're clearly doing very well, both in online ladders, competing online. You start your competitive history. Now, I have records and all my stats saying that you start playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive pretty much when it launches, right? Mm-hmm. But what did you do before Go? Did you have teams? Did you train? And let's talk about moving into this professional scene, making it to your first team. What were the early days of dupreeh as a player like?
I played a lot of like free for all back in 1. I played all the way back from 1.5. I think that's when I started, but that was just like as casual, just playing on this social server with all kinds of random people from Denmark. I also went to my first LAN. That was though in Source, but that was like my first idea of that you could actually play the game in a more like competitive way. And the reason why I moved on from 1.6 into Source was mainly my friends at school. They preferred play Counter-Strike Source, and I was like, I didn't really feel like playing because I thought it was a worse game. But since they played it that much, I was like, okay, sure, I'll start playing that. But throughout Counter-Strike Source, at least for the majority of it, was just like for fun with my friends and on this social server. And then I'd say maybe like the last 2-3 years of Counter-Strike Source, that's when I started realizing, hey, there's actually an opportunity to play them in a more competitive environment. But I never really had like a breakthrough in Source. The last year, maybe I'd say people started noticing my name, and I got better friends with like the players and like in the higher echelon of the Danish Counter-Strike scene. And that's when they invited me to play like fun games with like the best players and everything. But I never really got into a team. And I think that the release of Global Offensive actually helped me, because a lot of the old school players, which had played at the highest level in Source, were thinking, okay, I don't actually want to spend too much time learning a new game. Maybe I have to move on, like get like a proper job, whatever you want to say. And then that kind of that made the possibility of me making my move and actually joining that team that they would have leave. And I got invited to at that time, like the third best Global Offensive team, I'd say. But then we pretty rapidly became the best team in Denmark, because we just put a lot of hours into it. And then some of the older guys that had already said, hey, I don't want to play the game anymore, they kind of realized, hey, it's actually quite big, I want to move back. And then I got invited into playing with some of like the elite players that the previous set that didn't want to play. And that what became into Copenhagen Wolves at that time.
That's amazing. I want to ask your perspective on this, because I watched from South Africa, right? And I watched the 1.6 scene, I watched the Source scene. For anybody that's not as familiar with Counter-Strike 1.6 was still considered the premier game. It was the competitive. Even though there was Source tournaments, there was almost a bit of an edge,
like a rivalry or something. At least.
Rivalry, exactly. It's not the same comparison as like League of Legends and Dota. But if you're good at League of Legends, it doesn't mean crap because Dota's the better game. If you're good at Source, it doesn't mean anything because 1.6. But setting that scene that there was this rivalry, this little bit of competition. Global Offensive comes out and it looked like the Unify. It looked like, okay, 1.6 players had finally gone, right, we understand we need to change. We understand now. This is going to be the next one. Source players almost reluctantly, like, damn it, Source was fine. Why are we doing this? So now from your perspective, there's this opportunity. The communities are coming together. And for the next couple of years, we got Copenhagen Wolves, we got Dignitas, we got Team Solo Mid. Your professional career now starts to build up to the beginning of Astralis. What was that time frame like as a professional player? And then your personal journey on these very big name teams?
I was... At first, I think it was like, hey, my dream is actually coming true. I think that's what kind of hit me the first, that now I'm actually, for a long time, at least back in the days, or for as long as my career, we were like the best team in Denmark. That's what we kind of wanted to achieve, right, in the first place. But then we also wanted to, we wanted to be like recognized for more, I'd say, and that took some time. And then in the beginning, it was more like we looked up to a lot of the big names and Forest and Get Right, all these Swedish players, like the players from Virtus Pro at that time, the Polish guys, all these legends from 1.6 that we've been looking to compete against for so long. I remember the first time I actually got to play against these guys just in practice. It was kind of surreal that you all of a sudden found yourself in the same kind of place as these guys. It kind of came out of nowhere in some sense, because the spark of this new game just kind of united both scenes, and everyone was like thrown into this mix of who's actually the better team, who's the better player, who can transition into becoming the better players. And it was fun to have this kind of reset of both games. And I think that was very interesting. But obviously for me and for the guys in my team, we just always tried to look to improve. We wanted to become the better version of ourselves, and we just felt like every time we had like a new organization or we got new players into the team, we felt like we moved like a step up the ladder instead of taking a step down. So we always felt like we were improving, and I think that also helped us to create in the end, Astralis at least.
I mean, I love this. I really, really love the positive reflection, and it brings me so much joy hearing you describe what it's like being in a server with the Polish players, with the Swedish players, with, Get Right, with Forest, these legendary names in Counter-Strike. For anybody that isn't aware, Global Offensive dropped in 2012, right? And I love that it was this unifying force. You obviously are finding success. You're very humble in how you're reflecting on this. How good were you between 2012 and 2016? How competitive were you? Let's say maybe as an individual,
I mean, I think at that time the one thing that I think that sparked us the most, or at least what sparked me, is whenever I went up against players that had like a huge name from 1.6, I wanted to show them that I could compete with you guys as well. Like I want to beat you guys so bad that you guys remember my name. I think that's actually what stood out the most for me, and I think that is also what stands out for a lot of players nowadays when they play against some of the elite names. Some of them they've been looking up to. Also, why we see this generational shift that we have in Counter-Strike as today. It's this idea of that you want to prove yourself, that you just know that, hey, you guys are old, I'm gonna kick your ass, I'm the new guy in the block, right? That's what stood out the most to me. That's what mattered the most every single time I went up against these guys. And I think that we had a lot to learn. Like, we were just, to a vast majority, we were just like, a couple of aim kits running around. We were hitting headshots, but maybe we didn't really understand like the whole aspect of being professionals and having team dynamic and having the best tactics. But we just hit our headshots, and we played this kind of orthodox Counter-Strike that they were not really prepared for. I think that's what to me at least stood out. And then as things progressed, we realized that, okay, this will take us to a certain level, but if we want to become better, we want to be more consistent, we also need to actually develop some kind of play style that we can stick true to, that we can fall back onto if we don't really hit our shots.
What I love? You are such a team player. The question started asking about your personal reflection, and you've immediately made it a team. I mean, look, it is a team game, right? But
it is a team game.
And you do have to place this, because especially as somebody if you're going to be expected to land entry frags, there's so much utility that needs to be lined up. You need to have the right calls. You need to have the support behind you. If it doesn't work, you need to be traded out and things like that. I understand all of these concepts, and it's beautiful just to hear just how kind of humble you are in your reflection. And you're building me up now to my next line of questions, right? Let's talk about the origins of Astralis. Let's talk about the roster that comes together. Did Team Question Mark have a big role to play in, Astralis and how this works out? So what is the origins of this incredible team from 2016 onwards?
I think the main story behind Question Mark was that it was mainly just like a placeholder until we could release and reveal what we've been working on and what we want to be working on with creating our own organization. And the whole idea of creating our own organization came from different ideas, but the main idea came that we were tired of being in organizations where we didn't feel like we could actually make decisions on our own. We could not decide what sponsorships we wanted, and they would take like a big cut of our money. All these kind of things that we wanted to actually make a place where we could make the decisions ourselves, and also feel like the hard work that we put in was actually being more beneficial to us as a team. And we came from TSM, which was at that time, a very big League of Legends organization.
Massive.
That's obviously has a huge legacy in League, and for us joining them was extremely massive because it was an organization that was already proven and had a name. But we also feel like, because that's kind of where we started becoming this really great team, but we didn't really feel like TSM was being like. I remember we won a tournament and they didn't even write congratulations or put anything out on their social medias or anything. It was like the fans that actually pushed the organization to say, hey, you guys just won some, like your Counter-Strike division won something. How about you congratulate them? And I think that kind of also made us think that we could actually create something that was more beneficial to us as players and as a team. And that's what kind of sparked the whole thing for us. And, we wouldn't have done this without, having the proper help. Obviously, it was not only how do you say, like players ourselves? No, we also had like players or people in the back that would help us create this foundation and help us develop everything. So we wanted to also make a brand that stood out more than all the other. Like, we didn't want to be another organization kind of. We want to be like the first sort of player-owned organization that would also have a team that was contributing with the decisions, but also having a unique name inside of esports.
I mean, like a player-led organization, they're not something that are hugely frequent. I think you could definitely look at it does. Look, which also doesn't really make sense. I can look at other titles. I think when you do look at other games, especially console titles, I do think player-led organizations are more common. However, I also think the other titles where they have these player-led organizations, they tend to be slightly smaller games. They tend to be smaller communities. They don't have the history that Counter-Strike does. So, when you do look at especially the existing names in Counter-Strike and even now in League of Legends and in Dota, these are brands and institutions and businesses that have been around a long time. It's very clear you have a strong vision. You have an idea of what you want to accomplish with Astralis. Did you ever think you would be as successful as you ultimately ended up being?
No, definitely not. I don't think anyone could ever imagine what we went on to create. One thing is, the results. Like if you look at it like isolated as the team, as Counter-Strike, as what we would go out and achieve, but also if you flip things around into the commercial part of what we actually managed to create with Astralis, what we like the brand that we managed to create, at least back home in Denmark, but also worldwide, how big it actually ended up becoming. I don't think that we from the day that we actually came up with a name in a hotel room in California, we were like, hey, this actually sounds pretty cool. And then we had this investor meeting and we were like, yeah, let's just see where things are going to go, right? And we had this, I feel like the first jersey we ever had was just like a black shirt with like the Astralis logo, and that's it, right? And it was cool at that time. But then if you would fast forward like 6-7 years and to see what it had actually become, that's actually surreal.
So, question then: do you remember any of the other names? If you're sitting in a room and you remember the investor, what was another name that you can maybe remember?
We wanted to go with. There was also like a very old school Danish Counter-Strike team called Spirit of Amiga. That's like a super long time ago. That was like one of the first kind of professional Counter-Strike teams we had at home, but it was actually the rights to the name was owned by a guy that actually didn't like. We contacted him and said that we want to get that name, but he asked like a ridiculous price at that time for it. I was like, nah, we don't want to do that. He was feeling extremely delusional about the whole situation. So we had to find something else, and then we started looking in different directions. We kind of already knew that it had to be Astra something because it was like the logo with the A and everything. But then I'm actually not sure how we ended up. I think it was our manager that ended up, doing a lot of multitasking and trying to be like mind mapping what could actually sound cool and everything. So he ended up coming with Astralis. Like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Let's go with it. Had a good cling to it.
At what point did you go, we've made it, we've done it? Because you've got a strong vision, you've got a strong players, you start picking up successes. When is the moment where you look back and you go, we fucking did it?
I think somewhere around winning our first major. I think that was like the main goal for the team and also for the organization. And that's also when we started bringing in people from traditional sports in Denmark that could help take the organization to the next level, bring up the commercials, bring in the right kind of sponsors and everything. And I remember one of our first kind of big sponsorships was with Jack and Jones at that time, and also with Audi. And that was like pretty big names coming into esports at that time. So that was kind of surreal that you could have those big names and then you could have that on your shirt and you would like kind of represent them. And then winning the major just took that to like a whole another level, because then we started being like thinking around like, how can we actually make this bigger? How can we actually go out and do something bigger than we've already achieved? Is that by winning the next major, winning 2 majors in a row, 3 majors in a row? Can we bring all the young people that are looking up to us and aspiring Counter-Strike in Denmark? How can we create like a subculture at home? And I think we really did that like grandparents would bring their grandchildren to like events to go and watch Counter-Strike, because that's what they really wanted to see. Like they wanted an Astralis jersey for Christmas because that was like the most ultimate team that you can get when it comes to sport in Denmark. That's what we ended with by winning that first major, I think.
That's such an incredible answer. I also really particularly like the Audi reference, because an individual team got a car sponsorship, I think, before even leagues did. The LEC, the European League of Legends things, got sponsored by Kia in like 2020 or 2021. So you're already 4 years ahead of the league. Let's then talk about some of the developments and how Astralis also grew under the leadership. So the brand starts, you win your first major. It's in Atlanta in 2017. The team is now looking to the future. I also remember there being a lot of discussions around like sports psychologists and the mentality and the off-server developments. What was that like? How that started and how you convinced board members to pay for a psychologist for Counter-Strike?
I think the biggest, the most like the toughest challenge was to actually have 5 players that would buy into having someone coming into the team telling them to turn off their PCs and sit in a circle and then talk about, how do you actually feel right now? How does that make me a better Counter-Strike player? Right? I think that was the biggest challenge at first. Maybe not for me. I've always been like in my in terms of my own personality, been very open about things. So for me, it was quite easy, but it was definitely the most difficult challenge to have people buy into the whole idea of, hey, talk about your feelings, eat healthier, do sports, all these kind of things. How can you actually become a better Counter-Strike player by doing so? But that is the good part, that they brought people from traditional sports that could actually come with results and actually show us, and like, this is what you can become if you actually do that. You can become better if you do this. And I think it took a couple of months for us to buy into, but once we did, I think it actually proved very vital for us, specifically the sports psychology, because in teams there's just like so many issues. It can be from one player disliking one other. There could be like issues within the server in terms of who gets enough space and who gets the most credit, and there's so many things that can happen inside the human mind, right? So just to bring all these kind of things up to the surface, talk about them, and be very open about it was very important for us to also create a team where everyone felt good and everyone felt safe and everyone was in their own kind of groove, because we needed that to go and achieve the things that we went on to achieve.
Do you feel like you were a bit of a pioneer in the space when you look at the time frame and sort of how early it was, considering where teams are today, right? Like copied the Astralis model.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I think pretty much every team, at least when I'm looking at Counter-Strike, I can't really speak too much into other esports genres, but at least for Counter-Strike, it's very easy to see that what we did back in the days is what people have sort of copied. Maybe they've made like their own adjustments and own like additions to what they want and what they like. And some teams maybe don't buy into it. I think that is the most important thing, is that the team needs to buy into it. Because if you don't believe in the process and the fact that someone coming from the outside to help the team, then you're not going to gain any benefits from it. Then it's just going to be like a burden. And I don't think it's going to be as beneficial. But it's easy to feel that we've pioneered people to think more about that it's not just a video game that you sit down and play for like 8 hours and then you compete once in a while. It's more like an actual professional career.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those big successes. You can't not, okay? I want to see if I can maybe ask a slightly different one to how we celebrate these majors or any tournament really. Is there one tournament that emotionally hit different? Either major, minor, doesn't matter. Which one do you remember having a strong, happy or sad reaction to?
The most classic answer that I feel like I'm always bringing up, but it's also just the one that always stands out to me. But that's Katowice back in 2019. My father passed away 2 weeks before that tournament. He had been suffering from cancer for 9 years, and he passed away 2 weeks before we had to, or was like 3-4 days before we had to leave. And then he would, when we won the trophy, it would have been like 2 weeks. So it's like, for me, it was this massive roller coaster of, having to say goodbye to my father, go to the tournament, being sad and being around, but also being around with the friends and everything, winning the trophy, then go home like 3 days later, burying my dad. It's like this emotional roller coaster going up and down, right? That's probably the one that stands out to me. Also because it was a major. That was our third major in a row. So in terms of results, as a major and 3 times in a row, that means a lot. But it was also on a personal level, it means a lot to me because it was, the tournament where my father just passed away, and I kind of dedicated that to him and everything. So that tournament itself, also nowadays, with every time it returns, now it has moved on to Krakow though. But like the whole winter championship of ESL is always it's something that matters a lot to me. That's for sure.
And not only that, the Katowice trophy is arguably, especially back then, the most impressive tournament to win. It was the biggest. It was I think the Cathedral in Cologne is probably a second one that you could maybe argue between the two of them, right? But both of these tournaments are just so historic and legendary. You also pick up an Intel Grand Slam. That was your third. You win 2 additional majors, one more with Astralis, you win one with Vitality. Like, dude, how do you maintain this level of drive and find this level of success over what must be 8, 9, 10 years by this point?
I think myself and the team, we're just driven about this philosophy of always wanting to become the greatest team of all time. That's what we set out to do. And every time we made we said, okay, we want to, like the main goal that we set back in, I don't know, when was that? Like back in 2017, I believe. We had like this main goal. We put it on a piece of paper. On top of the paper, said that we wanted to be recognized as the greatest team of all time by analysts and the community and like other players. So that's like what we set out to do, right? And then we had all these sub goals that we had to achieve to actually get there. That was like winning a major, winning back-to-back majors, winning the first Grand Slam, all these kind of things, all these sub goals to actually get there. And then every time we went on before the new season started, we revisited this paper and said, okay, what did we actually achieve throughout the season? Okay, we won a major, we won the Grand Slam. And then I remember we were sitting and looking at each other like, so what is like the next step? Like, what is there anything great? And when we actually felt like we had achieved the main goal of becoming the greatest team of all time, we were thinking, what else can we do now? Like, what is what we wanted to build upon that? Yeah, so where do we go from there? That's when it got difficult, right? But I think we were always so passionate about achieving this thing that we just kept going and going. Every time we won a title, every time we won, and every time we did something, we created a new record of being the best team in the world for the longest period, whatever it could be. We feel like we added that on top of our legacy, and I think that's what kept us going. Like we wanted to just cement that we were the greatest team of all time every single time we went out.
I want to ask you about your legacy, but just before I do, if you only listen to this interview and if you only listen to the results, it's going to sound like dupreeh is just pulled this out. You know, we had a strategy, we had investors, we just won 3 major specs. What was the hardest major to win? Which one did you really have to grind for?
The second one, I feel like, was the hardest one. We had a very tough. That was in London, like in 2018. That was 20. So we wanted to. Yeah, 2018. We wanted to. We had just the first one. We had one with Kirby, and then we made it. Well, we didn't make a change. He decided to leave, and then we brought in matches to the team, and that's when we wanted to win the first major for matches. Obviously, we also wanted to get 2 majors. Like we wanted to be recognized as a team that could win more than just 1 major. So going to London. Also coming into London, I feel like we actually struggled a little bit in practice, and that was at a time where a lot of the things that we went out to achieve obviously hadn't been achieved yet. So we were still a kind of a new team with a new guy coming in, and we wanted to win another major. And it kind of like for players, it's if I can just win 1 major, then I'll be satisfied, right? So winning a second one would be like, oh shit, that's quite incredible. And then we went on to London having a little bit of rough time coming to practice. Also, the qualification in coming into the arena was a little bit difficult. But then when we hit playoffs, we also had like a super incredible hard playoff bracket with I'm not even sure who we played in the quarters, but I think it was FaZe and Semi and Navi in the finals where they Symbol in his prime time and everything. So that was obviously a tournament that was very tough to win, because it felt like the other majors that we won, at least looking at maybe the one in Vitality, we had a very easy playoff bracket. Also in the grand final of the one in Berlin, we played against Avantgarde, a team that no one really expected, right? So some of our major wins, I'd say, has looked easy, but I guess the team, like, it's not really up to us who we face, right? It's not really our fault. The other teams are messing up.
Yeah.
So
I'm taking a look at the bracket run, by the way. Astralis FaZe. So this is the Face It Major 2018 London. Astralis FaZe play Mirage and Inferno 16-14, 16-12. If you're a young gun, you had to get 16 rounds to win in Counter-Strike back in the day. Then you play Team Liquid in the semis. Nuke and Mirage 16-8, 16-7. And then in the finals, it's Na'Vi 16-9, 16-6 on Nuke and Overpass. I mean, I love that you even remember the individual matches. What is the
almost at least?
what is the weight of your legacy mean to you? There's 3 parts to this. When you look back as dupreeh as a player, what do you feel and how do you view dupreeh's playing legacy?
Quite massive. Sometimes I have to like when people ask me this question, it's about thinking back and then actually realizing how much I've actually achieved throughout this decade that I've been playing. Because once I'm in it and I'm just like day by day, and also when I play, it's just part of my life. That you kind of forget a little bit of what you've achieved, but then when you actually stop to realize and think about what you've actually done, it's quite impressive. So it is really massive, and I think that if I go back 15 years and someone would tell me that I would go on to achieve all these things, then I would probably be saying that, hey, squeeze my arm, please. So it's quite massive, that's for sure, and obviously. One thing is what I achieved with Astralis, but also individually what I did as a player. Sure, I never qualified as a player being the best player in the world, which I'm fine with because I've always been a little bit more of a team player. I've always loved to stand out as an individual, but for me the team has always been more important. So yeah, it's definitely split in 2 things.
Let's talk about what the legacy of Astralis means, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how the struggles in the last few years, how you feel about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm extremely proud of what we achieved in Astralis and being the greatest team of all time. And now we have Vitality trying to kind of, deal with it, right? So, I mean, it does take a little bit of hit on your pride. I'm not going to be lying, because we did go on and thinking that no one is ever going to be able to recreate that. And also with how competitive the game is by now and how good people are, we thought that it was going to be at least maybe a longer period before someone would actually go on and replicate what we've done, or maybe even doing it better. So obviously there is a little bit of your pride that's going to be hit, but in the end it's a different part of history. No one can ever erase us from the history book and what we achieved. So in that regard, I'm very proud of what we did. But I'm also a little bit sad with how everything ended in Astralis, in my opinion, because it's a lot of people are asking, so what actually killed the Astralis era? What killed everything in Astralis? And then people are thinking, hey, it was COVID who did it, right? It's COVID was like it kind of came out of nowhere, and LAN tournaments stopped happening, and that's where we excelled, right? That's where we wanted to always play good, turn everything into being online, and it was a little bit more difficult not being together, and not it was just like a different way of.
It's not the same.
It was just a different way of playing the game, and also because we've had such a long streak of just being so dominant, and the engine was just running, like we're just going so well, and then all of a sudden something that we couldn't control came in and abrupted it, and that was very tough on the team. And then I think we just for a long time had issues with players falling sick. Maybe it's not the right word, but like having to take like competitive breaks because they would be stressed out, or they feel like they had to take a small of a break, and that also took a toll on the rest of the players, myself included. That we used to be this good, and now all of a sudden we have to be able to stand in, and we're not as good as we used to be. And then obviously the ultimate nail in the coffin was when Device decided that he wanted to leave the team.
Yeah.
I remember that we were actually playing from our office in Copenhagen, and I think we lost to Furia in some online game, obviously because COVID was still going on, and everyone went their own ways. And then like half an hour later, everyone came together just like do some collective thoughts, and then he would just say that he would not re-sign his contract. That's what we had kind of already sort of agreed on, that we want to stick together, but he decided to leave somewhere else. And that was I remember Sonic he just stood up and just left. No, he didn't leave, he just left the room. I think he was so baffled. Yeah, exactly. And that was like the nail that kind of killed the Astralis lineup, because losing Device was one thing. Like he was our star player at that time, our AWPer and everything, and we couldn't really replace him. And that also kind of started the conversation with me and Sonic and Match moving on to another team, because we felt like we needed a new challenge somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I want to just take a brief moment. Device, dupreeh, Zipex, Glaive, Magix, Zonic. Okay. Like those names for those period of time, the majors, the impact you've had on the sport was incredible. One more question on Legacy before we start to look to Counter-Strike 2 in the future and next steps. But how do your parents feel? And let's say it's 2020. How do you, when your conversation with your parents go back to, Mom, when I was 10 and I played on my brother's PC, you said, don't do it. How do they feel about your legacy?
I think my biggest fan nowadays is my mom, which is good, right? She's turned into my biggest fan, and she was also the one that I had the biggest fights with. That's for sure. Like my dad always, I wouldn't say had like a more passive role. He would always stand by my mom's side, but he would always also be the one that said like, hey, you can go for it, but like I also think about like your studies and everything. Like you can't really put all your eggs in one basket. That's what he tried to tell me, right? But I had already made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do. So I had a lot of fights with my mom, that's for sure. But nowadays she's my biggest fan, and she went to two of my major wins. So she's only experienced me winning. She's never experienced me losing, so that's really good. And it just created like she's extremely proud, and she, I wouldn't say she brags about it for sure, but she's understood that. She came to the conclusion that what I set out to try and achieve back in the days actually paid off in a really big way. And it's not like she's like apologized or anything to me. Like that's not how we go in my family, right? But she was just concerned. That was like her main thing, right?
Yeah, she wants the best. She wants the best.
Yeah, she's my mom after all, right?
Have you ever done an "I told you so"? Have you ever had a moment that's like, I knew this is what I was going to do? Because you can play the "I told you so" card.
I think I did that when I actually not when I won a tournament, but I think when I got one of the issues obviously also when I was about to move out from my parents' place. I had to my first contract only had like not even like €1,000, and that was more than I need to get more money to actually pay my rent and everything. So they were like, hey, you need to get like a part-time job, but I never actually ended up getting that because we got like an updated contract with more money and everything. And when I got like €2,000 in contract. It's like, hey, I told you so. I could make money of playing video games. Like, I don't have to work. I just sit my fat ass and play video games.
That's amazing. Okay, let's do one last question on Global Offensive before we now start having to adapt and talk about the origins of CS2 and the origins of your next chapter in life. You win your last major with Astralis 2019, I think it was. Move around to a couple other teams, and you win another major with Vitality in 2023. Okay, so there's a 4-year gap. I believe at the time of recording, you're still the only player to have won 5 majors, and I'm fairly confident that's true.
Yes.
I'll say that again. There is one Counter-Strike player on the planet that has won 5 majors. Nobody else. No team, no coach, no friends. You are the only one that's done that. How?
Yeah, how? Dedication, I'd say, but also having luck. Luck does also pay in. That's for sure. But also having the right team. Like, you don't win a major by being the best individual. You have to have the best team. But also, I'd say when I joined Vitality, when I had my 4 majors and I joined together with Magisk, my sports psychologist, he asked me one question, like, at the first couple of days when we joined the team. He's like, so what is your like individual goal? Like, what do you want to achieve as a player, as Peter and everything? And I said, like, I want to be the only player in the world to have 5 majors, because we knew that CS2 was going to be announced somewhat soon, and there was going to be like this one last major left. And I knew that since Magisk was not part of the original Astralis lineup in the beginning, he had only won 3 with us. So I had 4 majors and he had 3, and if I would win one with Vitality with him being in the team, that would make me win 5 and him only 4, and that will make me surpass my previous teammates. So I knew that if I could win that major with Vitality, I could get that achievement. So that's what I set out to do, and that's also what happened. And I remember that on the final day, we had a talk, the grand final day of the Paris major. I had a talk with the guys outside back, and I said, like, no matter what, guys, today I am not losing today, because I didn't say like, hey, I'm one step away from my individual goal. I was just like, guys, there's no way we're gonna lose today. Like, I was so confident that we were gonna go out and do it. And then when we won, my sports psychology came running to me on stage, and he just hugged me and said, like, yes, Peter, you did it. And I was like, yes, I fucking did it.
That is insane.
That is insane.
Ear to ear for you. There's not enough people to clap and give you the congratulations, but the entirety of the global offensive era, one player has done it. It's you. It's incredible. You mentioned Counter-Strike 2. Let's talk about this, because now dupreeh's starting to become an older gentleman. Okay.
Yes,
Counter-Strike 2 coming up. There's new young guns that are taking to the server, right? Donk is starting to happen. So what was the transition to Counter-Strike 2 like for Peter?
Rough, that's for sure. I was on my highs, winning my 5th major with Vitality, but then I was benched like 2 weeks later, which was quite the surprise for myself, but also, like, I guess for everyone else. Like, a team that is at the top, they just won the major, the best ranked, the best team in the world. They make changes. Why? At that time, I was kind of furious. I'm gonna lie, I was disappointed. I was sad. It was very tough for me to feel like that. Hey, we just set out to do that thing that everyone in the organization and Vitality players, everyone wanted us to do, and then we did it, and then you get benched, right? But then you also mentioned, I'm becoming an older gentleman. And Vitality, they had other visions by having a younger team. And if there's one thing I can't change in the world, that's my age. So obviously getting cut was difficult, but it also kind of put me on a journey where I feel like no one is going to tell me. Like, no one's gonna make the decision for me when I'm done playing. So I set out to go improve myself. The issue was, as you mentioned, also a lot of young players are joining the server now and are putting in tons of hours because they want to achieve the things that I talked about with Get Right and Forest. They're the new ones coming in that they want to be kicking my ass and everyone else's ass that's been around for a while, right? And they have this eagerness and this fire of determination inside them that's what they set out to do. Whereas I'm more like defending my legacy, or like I'm just like staying afloat in some sense, right? I've done this for so long, so I had to take a step down. I had to realize that my situation, I was not like as attractive as I thought I would be, despite my legacy and what I achieved. So I had to take a couple of steps down, join some less known teams to try and prove my skills. So
Yeah.
my worth as well. Like just to stay in some of the big teams, and that took a while, and it was a hard grind. And then I was contacted again by Sonic. So it was also
Yeah.
Sonic benched me, and then he contacted me again to join Falcons. So there was a small personal victory that he actually needed me, right?
Yeah.
But I have been grinding my ass off in those less teams. So to be picked up by Falcons again to get a shot at playing Counter-Strike 2 was definitely amazing.
What was the final decision like that led to you standing on the stage, the grand finals at the Austin Major, where you get to announce your retirement? And also, I pause for a second there. Do you know how few players, for people who are watching this, how few players are worthy of announcing their retirement on a stage like a major, let alone the finals?
Yeah, it's I kind of set out to do that because, as you mentioned, I mean, like I kind of feel like, even though it makes me sound like selfish, but I kind of feel like my career deserved to end like that. I think it would be very wrong if I just like
you are
put out a
justified.
tweet. Yeah, like if I just put out a tweet like, "Hey, I'm done playing," or like, "Hey, picture or an interview," like that would feel wrong. Like I wanted to have like a proper ending to my career, like my playing career. So that's but I mean, like the main reason to doing it was my kids at home. I have 2 kids now. The travel time is literally unbearable when you have 2 kids. Like I miss them every single time I step out the door. So it's just been so tough, and also the grind. I mean, I also just had to stay true to how I feel about the game. I couldn't see myself, and I can't find time to put in 8-9 hours a day in a video game anymore. Not with my family, and not with everything that I have at home. And that's what you need to do nowadays to stay competitive. And I couldn't see that anymore, and I didn't want to continue in like a less team because I had already done this grind. I didn't want to go and prove myself once more, because I said to myself, I'm not going to do that again, because it was too tough. It was like playing 12 hours a day, and I was playing online games at random moments, and when the kids had to take I had to skip so much stuff with my kids. So I didn't feel like doing that. So I felt like it was the right decision to just finish it off in before it got like dragged out too long.
It was an amazing moment to watch after an incredible career and history. Your name will be written in Counter-Strike history books for a very long time to come. So this moves us on to the next chapter of your life. I'm glad you did mention your family, and I'll give you an apology because we are talking about dupreeh. So this is a little bit more focused on the gaming side, because you could also do a whole other thing on family life and parents and kids. That's not what today's about, though. Let's talk about the next chapter, okay? I know I have slid into your DMs and talked about your work on Analyst Desk. I'm a fan. I love listening to your commentary and your opinions. I know that you're involved in game development and things like that. So you announced your retirement. This is a little over a year ago, roughly-ish. What's next? And what are you currently doing? And what comes in later in 2026?
Yeah, that is the big question, right? Which I still don't have the answer for, because I don't feel like I've found that one thing that is going to replace specifically what I did by being a player. I haven't really made up my mind, and I'm not like rushing into making up my mind either. I'm kind of in a place right now where I'm just like trying to explore a lot of things to see what is fun, what am I good at, what can I learn, what do I actually enjoy, and that's why I got my first chance of doing Analyst Desk back in, like, that's like more than a year ago now, together with Blast. I got to try that, and I did like 6 or 7 events throughout 25, and now in 26 I've done one as well, and I'm going to be doing one more soon. So it's that's definitely something that I enjoy doing, but at the same time something doing full time that I'm having a hard time seeing myself doing like full time, because that would just end up me spending more time abroad than I want to. So and it's nice to be able to kind of give people a bit of more insight to how it is to work in a team, and it's also something that opened my eyes that it's actually more difficult than people think working live broadcasts. So it's also been a massive learning curve for me. But apart from that, then also I'm a big gamer myself. I love play video games, and I've always been intrigued and curious about how it is to develop a game myself, and that's why I joined in and started investing in Skyward Masters, which is the game that I'm working on right now, which we're looking to release sometime next year. And it's fun to be part of that process. I think we've gone a very long way the last 6 months, but we're still in a very early phase that we are still trying to find like the right direction for the game and the game feel and everything. So it's fun to actually be involved with something that is more like a passion project than something that just pays a salary or anything. It's pure out of passion and because I've invested money in it myself. And then my third kind of gig that I'm doing, I'm working with AceZone as well, which is a company that produces headphones, and we've just released some very interesting new equipment for pro players in terms of some in-ears that I hope that people will love. So it's also fun to be part to give something back to the players and also be working in behind the industry a little bit.
What I really, really like about the timing of this conversation with you is that it's still so fresh from stopping playing Counter-Strike because of how many years, right? It's over a decade at the highest levels and longer as a player, right? So 6 to 12 months doing other things is just not enough time to figure out what you're going to sink your teeth into. Does the call of competition ever leave your side? Because you can still get this fix if you look at coaching. You can still get this fix if you become a team leader, like you've done it once before. Maybe you build a brand that's even bigger. Is that something that is in the back of your mind as well?
Yeah, for sure it is, and I suspected this question to come up. I think it. No, for sure it is, right? It's it's definitely on my mind. I've always been looking to try and actually work with talents. I think like working with talents has always been like guide the young generation in the right direction to become better players has always been something that's been on my mind. But also working with more like a stable team, like maybe getting like a assistant coach role somewhere at first and see what that can transition into. But the thing that's holding me back right now is also my family at home. Because it would also just, if I just said, hey, I want to become a head coach, I would still travel as much as the players do, right? That wouldn't really make sense. So maybe in a couple of years, that's when I'm going to be looking, like when the kids are growing up a little bit more, that's when I'm going to be looking in that direction. Then I hope that at that time I will not be like too old for people to actually give me a shot, right?
I don't think this for a second. Listen to yourself. Dude, I'm not being funny. You don't have to listen back to this interview. I'll give you the cliff notes. You set out to make a player-owned organization that is considered the greatest of all time. I think you did that. You set out to become the only Counter-Strike player in Global Offensive to have 5 majors. You did that. You set up it sounds to me like you are both inspirational and aspirational, because whatever you set your mind to, it becomes successful. It's something that this kind of conversation is trying to hint at and get to. I want to say I'm looking forward to it because I want to see whatever plans, whatever things, and on behalf of Esports Awards, we can always help promote and discuss those things.
Yeah, of course.
dupreeh, Peter, we're coming to the end of our allotted time for the conversation. You said something earlier that really stuck with me. That towards the end, the streak that Astralis has set out is somewhat challenged by Team Vitality right now. In my mind, there are 3 win streaks that matter in Counter-Strike. I'm going to say in the last 15 years. Okay, I'm not going to go pre-2010. I think the NIP CSGO undefeated streak is something that I believe could be considered one of the greatest win streaks of all time. I believe the Astralis 5 majors could be considered one of the greatest of all time. And I think it's fair to add Vitality's current win streak into the list. If you agree with those 3, which one is the biggest and best and why?
I mean, I've always, I got to defend myself. And I said on broadcast when I was in Krakow, I'm going to die on this hill by defending my own Astralis era, right? I've come to the conclusion, though. I've come to the conclusion now that I am at a point where I'm intrigued to say that Vitality is somewhat aligned with the Astralis one right now. And that obviously sets them up for the opportunity of becoming better, right? So that's something that's hard to admit. But in all honesty, I'm very proud of what I achieved with Astralis, obviously with the era and everything. But what actually matters the most to me is having my 5 major championships for myself. And the one that is close to challenging that one is Apex. And he's living rent-free in my head right now. And so we're living rent-free in both of our heads, right? It's actually quite funny because he mentioned this all the time, right? I think he really wants to, achieve that, but also do greater than that. So, I mean, what Vitality is doing right now, it's incredible. And I don't think that anyone has come to the realization how insane it actually is.
You need context. First of all, we need distance from it because also it's still going, right? Like the Vitality era, I think we're still
Mhm.
live in it.
Mhm.
And I want to see how long it can run for. I'm going to ask one more question. Which era was hardest between the NIP, the Astralis, and the Vitality? Because I might think that the current Vitality era was more difficult than yours.
Yeah, I think that's also the hard comparison, right? Because if you go back in time, sure, we were like pioneers in all terms of how we prepared as well, and I think we got a lot of good stuff out of preparing for our opponents, where people didn't do that much back in the days. Nowadays, it's very like traditional. People prepare a lot for opponents in terms of play style and everything, and counter stratting each other. I think that's like the individual level today is without a doubt higher than it was back in 1819. That's for sure. So, but I'm also at a place right where I feel like some of the teams right now that are trying to battle with Vitality and trying to dethrone them are also having their struggles. So I feel like Vitality is also at a place right now where they feel like the ones that are supposed to be challenge them in terms of Falcon's potential, also Spirit, are still struggling a little bit, right? The closest one that has been, like the one that's been closest has been Mouseballs, and they have a very hard time beating Vitality.
Kryptonite, complete kryptonite.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter what happens. I mean,
that's what I mean, right?
Just every time that matchup happens, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, there's another 3-0. I don't mean any disrespect to Mouse, right? But like, there's just some sort of mental block or some sort of rock, paper, scissors thing going on. I'm going to revisit.
Also,
I'm gonna revisit this conversation once the Vitality era is officially wrapped up, because we need to see how long it goes, how far it goes. All right, I want to say that the last couple of things we're going to do now is going to be a little bit more kind of short, quick fire questions, quick fire questions. Try to give me the first thought that comes to mind. If you want to expand, you can. If you don't, I'll give you the next one. Okay.
Cool. Sure.
Let's start with some easy ones. Your favorite Counter-Strike map of all time?
Nuke, because of the tactical depth.
Your favorite version of Counter-Strike and why?
It has to be Global Offensive. I think that's the easiest answer, right? That's where my career peaked.
One teammate you made better.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say Device, actually.
I like this.
Yeah, I think we had a really good chemistry back in the days, and we were always a strong pair.
One teammate that made you better.
Sipix, for sure. I think he's clearly my best friend from that time.
That is amazing. Who was the hardest team that you faced?
I'd say the Brazilians, when they were named like SK Gaming back in the days with Fallen and Cold Zero.
Oh, that was such a good time frame. I actually took SK Gaming's 1.16 to South Africa. It's a different story for a different day. Let's go this one. Who was your most annoying individual player to play against?
That would have to be Robs, I think. Always annoying.
The favorite player to kill. Every time that you killed X player comes up in the feed, it makes you smile.
Someone like Get Right, I think.
That's good. And one last quick fire. Who should we have a conversation like this with next?
Oh, that's a good one. I would love to hear from someone from my time as well. Someone from the Polish Guard. It's one of the old Virtus Pro players. Maybe Taz or Neo would be nice.
Okay. Virtus Plus.
Because they go far back.
Yeah, they do. I mean, was it Taz, Neo, Pasha?
Taz and Neo, Pasha. And then you have Cuban and Lord as well.
Cuban, thank you. I just went to the most famous ones. Okay, that does it for the quick fires. I'm going to say, dupreeh, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time. Give us one last shout out. And this is the part of the sales pitch. What are your Twitches? What are your channels? What websites do we need to go to find out more about Skyward Masters? Let our viewers know.
Obviously, if you're interested in seeing the game that I'm developing, you can go to skywardmasters.com. You can look at that one, but also join our Discord channel at Skyward Masters. Apart from that, I also want to give a shout out to A-Zone, which is the team that I'm working with creating the headset I'm using right now, but also my newest product, Ineos, that I helped develop. And apart from that, I just hope that you guys have enjoyed listening to my voice for a little bit of time, and hope that you guys will also follow my journey, despite not being a player anymore. And then I want to say thank you for having me.
I cannot wait to see what you win at next. There's no doubt in my mind you're going to find more success. Thank you so much for taking the time, dupreeh.
Thank you so much.
We are going to wrap up this episode of the Esports Awards Origins podcast right here, right now. There's a whole bunch of other interviews. You can just click the playlist and the links everywhere else. Until next time, I've been Quickshot. He's been dupreeh.